Usually when you look at a map of the world, your brain naturally focuses on the borders. Like you see Japan over here as this island nation and then India way over there.
Right, part of this massive subcontinent.
Exactly. And between them are just thousands of miles of deep, treacherous ocean. I mean, we are completely conditioned to assume that ancient cultures basically developed inside these isolated geographical bubbles, totally cut off from one another.
Well, it is a comforting way to organize human history. I mean, categorizing civilizations into neat, unconnected little boxes makes the past feel manageable. But that map you're picturing in your head right now is really just a modern illusion.
And dissolving that illusion is exactly our mission for this deep dive today. We are taking you, the listener, on a journey to unearth a totally hidden historical narrative.
Yeah, and we are drawing on some incredibly candid source material for this. We have a translated transcript of an interview with a working Shinto priest.
Who also happens to be the editor-in-chief of a major shrine yearbook, by the way.
Right. And alongside that, we're looking at some dense historical texts detailing linguistic parallels between Japanese and Indian languages.
So we are heading toward a really provocative conclusion today. The idea that Japan might actually hold a secret global program to save the world, all built on ancient maritime trade and shared spiritual DNA.
But to even begin to understand that concept, we really have to look at how close this ancient knowledge came to being completely erased.
Which brings up a huge misconception. Because when we think about Japanese culture changing, we usually think about post-WWII, right? But the source reveals the real turning point was actually the Meiji era.
Yes, exactly. The Meiji Restoration in the late 19th century is heavily romanticized as this glorious era of rapid modernization. But the text we are analyzing details a very dark shadow cast by that progress.
Right, because the new Meiji government was looking at the global landscape, seeing Western powers colonizing huge swaths of Asia, and realized we need to centralize our own power. Fast.
And to achieve that absolute authority over the populace, they had to aggressively suppress original Shinto practices.
I really want to break down how they actually did that.
Yeah.
Because they targeted something very specific, right? A practice called Shinkan.
Yeah, Shinkan, which basically translates to spirit possession or divine communication.
Right.
Think about the political implications of that. In these ancient practices, an individual would enter a deep trance state to directly receive messages from the divine.
Which is a nightmare for a central government.
Oh, absolutely. For a fragile new government trying to enforce strict policies from Tokyo, having a decentralized religion where anyone might suddenly channel a divine voice is a massive threat.
You definitely cannot have local shrine priests going into trances and, announcing that the gods are suddenly angry with the new tax laws.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the government simply outlawed the divine voice. The only acceptable divine mandate was the one coming straight from the state.
But they didn't stop at just banning the rituals. They actually went after the physical infrastructure of the communities. The source text reveals they systematically destroyed over 100,000 shrines across Japan.
We really have to pause on that number. Over 100,000. Because a shrine wasn't just a wooden building. It was the civic heart of a village.
Yeah, it was where the local economy gathered, where festivals happened.
Right. The statistics in the source are staggering. Wakayama Prefecture lost 92% of its shrines.
92%. Wow.
Yeah. And Mi Prefecture lost 88%.
I mean, tearing down a local shrine is essentially seizing the village square. It forces the whole community to look toward the central state rather than their local traditions for authority.
And, well, it was mostly a land grab, too. All that wealth and land those shrines sat on was just absorbed by the government.
Which is just step one.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the Meiji government then attempted to forcibly mold the remnants of Shinto into a single unified religion called Daikyoin.
They just wanted a state-run religion for the optics, didn't they?
Totally. They wanted to sit at the negotiating table with Western nations and present this clean, monotheistic style face. To say, you have Christianity and we have this unified dogma called Shinto.
Yeah, the text notes this entire Daikyoin initiative collapsed in spectacularly fast fashion. Like within 3 years, the project was completely dead.
Yeah, they had to concede and formally recognize 13 distinct sects, like Izumo Taishakyo.
And Izumo Taishakyo is one of the oldest, most foundational spiritual lineages in Japan. They just refused to be absorbed.
The reason the state failed so quickly is really crucial here. The government's attempt to force a single rigid dogma completely violated the core nature of ancient Shinto, which is known as Kushinto.
The priest in the interview summarizes this philosophy so brilliantly. He basically says, if there are 100 shrines, well, there are 100 correct ways to practice.
Yes, every single shrine possesses its own ancient secret text, its shaden, and every single one of those texts is considered valid.
Which is wild.
It is. I mean, try to map that onto the religious structures we are familiar with in the West. We are so deeply conditioned by orthodoxy. One sacred text, one ultimate truth.
Right, and if someone else's text contradicts yours, it's heresy, which usually leads to devastating holy wars.
Okay, let's unpack this, because ancient Shinto functioned entirely differently. It's almost like an open source operating system.
Ooh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, you have this underlying core code, the shared reverence for nature and the divine, but then thousands of local developers, the shrines, are creating their own distinct branches based on their local geography and needs.
And nobody is fighting a holy war over whose version is the official proprietary software.
Exactly. Look at the Nihon Shoki, the Chronicles of Japan. It is one of the oldest historical records in the country.
And the priest points out a really fascinating structural detail about it, right?
He does. 70% of the text consists of parallel, differing versions of myths. Only 30% makes up the main timeline.
And the formatting is what really blows my mind. Because in a modern history book, if there's a contradictory myth, it's buried in an appendix or shrunk down in a tiny footnote.
But not in the Nihon Shoki.
No. All the conflicting versions are printed in the exact same font size, because they are all treated as equally true. It's such a stark contrast to rigid historical records.
Right. The visual layout itself is a theological statement. It declares that the divine is far too vast to be captured by a single narrative.
So if Shinto accepts infinite truths, how does it view God and humanity? Because the expert source reveals a bit of a paradox here. The priest claims Shinto is actually an ultimate monotheism.
I know it sounds crazy when they have millions of gods, but there is only one root creator god, one ultimate source.
Okay.
However, all other gods, and even human beings, are what is known as Wake Mitama.
Wake Mitama, meaning divided spirits or divine sparks.
Yes. Imagine a massive bonfire. If a spark pops off and lands on the ground, that spark isn't the whole fire, but it's made of the exact same essence.
It is fundamentally fire.
Exactly. In Shinto, you, the listener, are a Wake Mitama, a divine spark broken off from that original source.
Which fundamentally changes the entire concept of spirituality. I mean, usually out-of-body experiences or deep meditation are framed as your soul leaving your body to go up into the clouds.
Right, trying to reach out into the void. But in Shinto, it's not about going outward, it is about going incredibly deep inward.
It's not like shooting a rocket into space to find the divine. It's more like a Russian nesting doll. You just keep opening layers inward until you find the very center, which connects you to everything else.
That's a perfect way to describe it,
Yeah.
reconnecting with that root source already inside you. And this interconnectedness actually explains concepts like Reiki healing.
Oh, right, the distance healing thing.
Yeah. People are always skeptical how you can heal someone in Brazil from a room in Japan. But because you are both Wake Mitama, connected to the exact same root god, the physical distance is completely irrelevant.
You know, this sounds incredibly similar to Indian philosophy, like the concepts of Atman and Brahman.
It is functionally identical. Atman being the individual soul, and Brahman being the ultimate universal reality. The realization that they are the same thing.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. Because if we're suggesting Japan and India shared spiritual DNA, we need hard evidence. And the source texts deliver that through ancient linguistic parallels.
Yes, the linguist Susumu Ono did some groundbreaking research here. He compared ancient Tamil, specifically Sangam literature from around 200 to 400 BC, with ancient Japanese.
And he didn't just find a few trade words. There is a massive overlap in their 3,000 most basic foundation words. Words for eating, running, family.
Which is huge because linguists know those core survival concepts resist change over time. But it gets even wilder. Both cultures share a deep love of poetry.
Right, and that Sangam poetry uses the exact same 575 syllable meter the Japanese haiku uses.
It's undeniable, and when you look at modern Hindi and Japanese, the grammatical similarities are still there. They both use the SOV, subject, object, verb, sentence structure.
So instead of saying, I eat the apple, you have to put the verb at the end and say, I the apple eat.
Exactly. They also both rely on postpositions. So instead of putting a preposition before a word, like in the house, they attach particles after the noun.
Like the Japanese particles ga, o, and ni.
Right. Hindi uses a nearly identical system, and they share really similar foundational vowel arrangements.
Of course, the expert source balances this by noting the differences today. I mean, Hindi has gendered nouns, which Japanese doesn't have at all.
Yeah, and Hindi uses the Devanagari script, which has that continuous horizontal line across the top of the words called a shurareka.
But wait, could that structural overlap just be a massive coincidence? How could cultures thousands of miles apart have influenced each other so deeply back then without crossing the ocean?
Well, they did cross the ocean. The modern assumption that ancient people couldn't travel that far is just wrong. They didn't rely on heavy wooden boats that sink when punctured.
Right, they used reed boats called ashi in Japan.
Yes, reeds are full of tiny air pockets, so the boats naturally float even if they get damaged. These ships were massive, easily holding 100 people, so maritime travel between India and Japan was highly feasible.
And the source text backs this up, right? The priest talks about his own family history.
He does. He has an ancestral grave from before the Muromachi period, and the massive stone it's made from was brought all the way from India by ship.
Just casually hauling multi-ton rocks across the ocean 1,000 years ago. Unbelievable. The text also mentions King Kim Suro of Korea, right?
Yeah, historical records show he married a princess from Ayodhya in India, proving these ancient maritime networks were widespread.
Wow.
This raises an important question, though. What does all of this interconnectedness mean for Japan today?
Right. What is the ultimate conclusion here?
The priest calls Japan the Kakushi-dama, the hidden ball.
Like a trick play in baseball.
Exactly. While the rest of the world fractured and fought wars over single-truth religions, losing that original universal connection, Japan safely preserved it.
Because it was protected by its geography, it acted like a cultural vault for these ancient shared global truths, like Wake Matama.
Right, so the provocative idea is that Japan secretly holds the program to save the world. The world didn't lose its connection, it just forgot how to access the file.
So what does this all mean? We started by confronting how the Meiji government aggressively suppressed the organic nature of Shinto to consolidate power.
Right. Destroying 100,000 shrines.
Then we explored the open-source reality of Koshinto, where infinite truths exist side by side.
We unpacked Wake Matama, the fact that you are a divine spark, and that spirituality is an inward excavation.
And finally, we followed the mind-blowing linguistic and maritime evidence, proving ancient Japan and India were deeply connected. So I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder.
Yeah.
If our ancient languages, poetry meters, and deepest spiritual concepts are this intertwined across vast oceans, how much of what we stubbornly call our unique national identity today is actually just a single thread in a global tapestry we've forgotten how to read?
That is something to think about.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the history you've been taught.